He walked into her ceremony. She left everyone behind. The crimson moons of Valdris hung low in the violet sky as Princess Zara of the Celestial Empire prepared for the most important day of her life. The ancient bonding ceremony would unite her, with Commander Thex of the Northern Fleet, securing an alliance that had taken decades to negotiate. Her silver-scaled skin shimmered under the ceremonial lights, while hundreds of dignitaries from across the galaxy filled the grand amphitheater. Zara stood at the altar wearing the traditional azure robes of her bloodline, the weight of expectation pressed down on her shoulders like the gravity of a dying star. She had trained for this moment since childhood, studying diplomatic protocols and military strategy. Everything depended on this union. Her people needed the resources that only the Northern Fleet could provide. The ceremony began with the chanting of the ancient words. As the priests raised their crystalline staffs toward the heavens, Zara felt the familiar tingle of her telepathic abilities awakening. The sacred ritual would bind not just two individuals but two entire civilizations through the mystical connection that her species possessed. Then the impossible happened. Figure burst through the ceremonial barriers, moving with a speed that defied logic. The security forces of three different species scrambled to respond, but the intruder moved like liquid lightning through their ranks. Gasps echoed through the amphitheater. As the stranger approached the altar, he was human. Zara had studied humans during her diplomatic training. She knew they were a young species barely having achieved interstellar travel. Their physical capabilities were supposedly unremarkable compared to the enhanced beings that dominated galactic politics. Yet this human moved through her elite guards as if they were standing still. The stranger was tall by human standards, with dark hair and intense green eyes that seemed to burn with an inner fire. His clothing was simple black fabric that looked almost primitive compared to the ornate garments surrounding him, but there was something about his presence that made the air itself seem to vibrate with potential energy. Security forces raised their plasma weapons, but the human raised his hand, showing he carried no visible weapons. Commander Thex stepped forward, his scales bristling with anger at the interruption. The human spoke, and his voice carried clearly across the amphitheater, despite the chaos. "My name is Jake Collins. I come seeking Princess Zara with urgent information that concerns the survival of her people." Zara felt her breath catch. The human knew her name and spoke her language with perfect pronunciation. More disturbing was the way her telepathic senses reacted to his presence. Most alien minds felt cold or distant when she touched them with her abilities, but this human radiated warmth like a star commander. Thex drew his ceremonial blade. The metal gleamed with deadly promise as he pointed it toward the intruder. "You dare interrupt the sacred bonding, human filth. Your species has no authority here. Guards, remove this creature before I end its miserable existence myself." Jake Collins looked directly at Zara, and something passed between them that she could not explain. Her telepathic abilities had always been strong, but with this human, she felt a connection that defied everything she understood about mental linking. Only members of her own species could form such bonds. The human continued speaking, his words cutting through the tension like a blade through silk. "Princess, your Northern Fleet allies have been compromised. 3 days ago, I intercepted communications proving they plan to strip mine your homeworld after the bonding ceremony. They need access to your planetary defense codes, which this marriage will provide." The amphitheater erupted into chaos. Accusations flew between different factions, while security forces struggled to maintain order. Zara felt the weight of 1,000 decisions pressing down on her. The alliance had been years in the making. Without it, her people faced slow extinction as their resources dwindled. Commander Thex snarled, showing rows of razor-sharp teeth, lies and propaganda from a primitive species that barely crawls among the stars. "Princess, do not let this creature poison your mind with its desperate fabrications." But Jake Collins produced a small device from his clothing. With practiced efficiency, he activated a holographic display that filled the air above the altar. The images showed detailed mining surveys of Zara's homeworld, along with tactical assessments of her planet's defenses. Most damning were the recorded conversations between Northern Fleet commanders discussing the exploitation timeline. Zara's silver-scaled skin grew pale as she recognized the voices of beings she had trusted. The evidence was overwhelming, and her telepathic senses detected no deception from the human. He radiated truth like heat from a forge. The princess felt her world shifting beneath her feet. Everything she had believed about the alliance crumbled as the recorded conversations continued. The Northern Fleet had played a masterful game, using her people's desperation against them. The bonding ceremony was not salvation, but the first step toward slavery. Commander Thex lunged forward with his blade, but Jake Collins moved with that impossible speed again. The human caught the commander's wrist and with a simple twist sent the weapon spinning away. The Northern Fleet officer staggered back, his eyes wide with shock at being overpowered by a supposedly primitive being. Zara made her choice. She stepped down from the altar, her ceremonial robes rustling like whispered promises. Walking past her confused advisors and shocked guests, she moved toward the human who had shattered her carefully constructed world. Jake Collins extended his hand toward her, and when she took it, the connection between their minds exploded into something beyond her wildest understanding. Through their joined consciousness, she felt his memories and motivations. He was not just a random human, but an intelligence operative who had spent months uncovering the conspiracy against her people. More than that, she sensed something in his mind that called to her on a level deeper than politics or survival. There was a bond forming between them that transcended species and defied explanation. Her telepathic abilities had never responded to an alien mind with such intensity. The crowd watched in stunned silence as their princess took the hand of the human intruder. Together they began walking toward the ceremonial exit while chaos erupted behind them. Security forces from different factions pointed weapons at each other, uncertain who represented friend or foe commander. Thex shouted orders, but his authority crumbled as more evidence of the conspiracy spread through the assembled dignitaries. The Northern Fleet's carefully laid plans unraveled in minutes as their true intentions became impossible to deny. Zara felt the weight of abandoning her people, but she also sensed a different path opening before her. The human ship waited beyond, the atmosphere equipped with technology that seemed impossibly advanced for such a young species. Through their mental connection, she glimpsed possibilities that the established galactic powers had never considered. Jake Collins had not come alone. They reached the exit. Other humans emerged from concealment, moving with that same liquid grace that seemed to define their species. They formed a protective circle around Zara, while she processed the magnitude of her decision. The princess looked back once at the amphitheater where her old life lay in ruins. Her advisors called her name while security forces struggled to restore order. The alliance that was supposed to save her people had been revealed as a trap, but the alternative seemed equally impossible. Through her connection with Jake Collins, she felt his certainty that humanity offered something different. The young species possessed technologies and capabilities that the established powers had overlooked or dismissed. Their rapid advancement through the galaxy was not luck, but the result of abilities that older civilizations could not understand. The human ship descended through the violet atmosphere with engines that made no sound. Its hull reflected the light of the crimson moons as it settled onto the ceremonial grounds. The design was elegant in its simplicity, lacking the ornate decorations favored by older species. Zara walked up the boarding ramp, still holding Jake's hand. Behind them, the sounds of political chaos grew louder as different factions realized the implications of the failed ceremony. The Northern Fleet's conspiracy was exposed, but the power vacuum it created would lead to conflict across multiple systems as the ship lifted away from Valdris. Zara watched her homeworld shrink in the viewports. She had abandoned everything familiar for an uncertain future, with beings her people barely understood. Yet through her mental connection with Jake Collins, she felt possibilities that the established order could never provide. The human explained that his species had been watching the galactic political situation with growing concern. The older civilizations had grown stagnant, locked into patterns of exploitation and manipulation. Humanity offered something different, not through superior firepower, but through approaches that others had forgotten. Through the ship's advanced sensors, Zara watched as other human vessels emerged from concealment around her homeworld. They had been prepared for multiple contingencies, including armed conflict if the Northern Fleet had tried to prevent her departure. The young species showed a level of tactical sophistication that belied their supposed primitive status. Jake Collins led her to the ship's observation deck, where the stars wheeled overhead in patterns she had never seen from this angle. The connection between their minds continued to deepen, revealing layers of understanding.